Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. If you have a young person in your life, how have you talked to them this week about the fatal shooting of right-wing activist Charlie Kirk? How do you discuss controversial, even toxic views, enable free debate, and condemn violence? These are difficult questions. We'll talk through them in our first half hour. After 12:30, our bi-weekly visit with Brian Minter. He'll talk about tulips, garlic, and as always, he'll take your gardening questions. I'm Michelle Elliott. Welcome to BC Today. Well, the killing of Charlie Kirk is catching the attention of university and college students. The 31-year-old was a key force in building support among younger voters for President Donald Trump and the MAGA movement. He was also well known among young people beyond U.S. borders. CBC's Rohith Joseph spoke with some students at the University of Victoria yesterday.
I don't know, it's a really complicated situation for me. I mean, I didn't agree with anything Charlie Kirk said, but I don't wish violence on anybody.
From what I know, he wasn't a very, there was a lot of people who didn't like him, you know. It seemed like his messages he was pushing were hurtful to others. And with the current, like, how tense it is in the United States, it makes sense that when many people are having their ways of life threatened, that violent actions are beginning to take place and become quite commonplace in the world, well, in the United States especially, yeah.
I found it ironic when I heard about it because he's a very gun-forward person, and being killed by a gun, you know, that's obviously, there's some irony there, and that's the real issue why I'm not really afraid for stuff happening here in Canada, because we have very well done gun control rules and gun laws, and that's important when you see all these like school shootings and these shootings in general. You understand that it's because they don't have regulations that these things are happening.
I was really jarred, honestly. I didn't think that anything like that would happen, let alone at a university. But I mean, at the same time, if it's gonna happen, it's probably gonna happen there.
There as in
a large public setting, especially with school shootings being unfortunately kind of frequent. And it was like a very large political sort of charged event, and so but yeah, in the school setting it's kind of terrifying, especially as a university student, to think that that could happen potentially in an environment like this, and that all those students had to go back to school today.
On the shooting, a 22-year-old Utah man has been arrested. The suspect has been named as Tyler Robinson, a state resident who did not attend Utah Valley University, where Kirk was gunned down. The killing has prompted fears and condemnations of political violence in the U.S., as well as discussions around free speech, debate, and controversial and toxic views. Charlie Kirk promoted right-wing views. He shared conspiracy theories throughout the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. He said, quote, "We made a huge mistake when we passed the Civil Rights Act in the 1960s," and he was critical of LGBTQ plus rights. He said he promoted free debate and did so at college and university campuses, and he played an influential role in rallying young Republican voters. So we are talking about young people right now. Asking you, how have you talked to them about this week's political violence? And how do you discuss questions around controversial views, even toxic views, and free debate? How challenging is it for you? If you're a young person, you can call us too. Just hit pound 690 on your cell phone or dial 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can also email bctoday@cbc.ca or leave a comment on our TikTok Live. Terri Givens is a political scientist at UBC and joins me here in studio. Good afternoon. Thanks so much for coming in.
It's my pleasure. Thanks, Michelle.
My goodness, hearing those comments from those young people, you know, terrifying. There's dealing with the violence, as well as the state of political discourse. How are your students, the young people around you, processing this?
Well, I had a class yesterday where we were having discussions around this. And I think for young people, you know, they're in this milieu of social media. And the scary thing is so many of them are sharing the video of Charlie Kirk being shot. And so, you know, we talked a bit about trauma and the ways that this may manifest itself. But I think the important thing is to keep talking. So, I mean, I've written a book called Radical Empathy, and one of the things I emphasize is to have empathy for each other but also really communication is really key right now. If you're scared, if you're concerned, talk to people about it. Talk to people you trust, who you think might be able to give you some guidance around this.
And guidance, when it comes to guidance, there's condemnation of violence across the political spectrum. At the same time, the rhetoric has been amped up, including from the U.S. president himself. So when it comes to guidance, where are young people turning right now? Where can they turn?
Well, I mean, obviously their families are the first stop, but I think that it's important for those of us who are in education to also, think about ways that we can support our students. And, part of it is understanding what are some of the processes that students have access to, whether it's, guidance counselors, there are student organizations, and as professors, we need to make sure that we're making sure our students are aware of resources that are available to them. And, it's a time of fear, but it's also a time for us to come together in community.
How did your students feel about Charlie Kirk's views?
They were not happy about them mostly. And, the thing to keep in mind is that, Charlie Kirk was appealing to a particular subset of students. And I became aware of his work way back in the early 2000s when I was a professor at University of Texas at Austin. And, the young Republicans on campus were, involved with what became Turning Point USA. Mm-hmm. And so, this has been around for a while. And, it's Charlie, really tapped into something that was already happening on a lot of college campuses. So, I think it's important to keep in mind that there's, this ongoing connection, and that's been building since, for a long time.
And so there's the views, and there's of course acknowledging that violence and killing is always wrong. When it comes to debate and discussion around controversial views, how do you see the discourse around that among students?
Actually, I think the students are doing pretty well.
I am heartened to hear that.
To be honest, I think, I've had many situations where students have divergent views in the classroom. And one thing I do is I try to model for them. How do you have these conversations? And part of it is I always start with empathy. And the one thing I told my students yesterday is empathy is not absolution. Just because you have empathy for somebody or try to see things from their perspective does not mean that you have the same perspective as them. You may vehemently disagree or think that they're, some of the views of Charlie Kirk, I'm sure people, I know they have been harmful to people. So having empathy does not mean that you are taking on somebody's views or anything like that, but it means that in some ways you're having empathy for yourself and saying, how do I process this? How do I work through these views? And try to have, basically you have to be kind of true to yourself. How do I want to respond in a way that is true to who I am?
As you say, his appeal was to a subset of young people. Angelo Isidoro, who is the executive director of the BC Conservative Party, he was on CBC's On the Coast yesterday, and he looked back to when he was a post-secondary student, and he said that there's this generation of young conservatives who felt at the time, I said, to still to some degree, as though they were not permitted to share their opinions in public. How do you deal with that?
So it is a sentiment that I see in universities around Canada and the U.S. I've been at McGill and now here at UBC. And, I think that the reality is, as professors, certainly as a political scientist, I try to encourage, diversity of views. And, the question is, if the students are feeling this way, we need to respond to it somehow. That doesn't mean we go to the extremes, right? So I think the important thing is to keep in mind that, yes, we want a diversity of views, but I tell my students we have to stick to facts because unfortunately there's a lot of misinformation out there, and we don't want to say, oh, everything's okay. Not everything is okay. And we want to make sure that we are, like I said, we are modeling ways to discuss these things that use facts. I tell my students, you can have differences of opinion, but you have to back it up. You have to have facts. You have to make sure that you understand. And also, it's hard, sometimes to get people to try to have empathy for others. But, if we can try to work that into the conversation, I think that that's something that can help the process more generally.
Is there, it's hard to even see, like, is there a line that you can draw as well? Because, while he talked about, well, Kirk did talk about open and free debate. I just want to quote Nicole Hemmer, who's an associate professor of history at Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee. And on his stated views on Black people and LGBTQ plus people, she said, this is not civil discourse. This is opening up a debate about people's basic rights and humanity. What are your thoughts about that? Where that line is?
I agree, because people are saying, oh, Charlie Kirk was for free speech, but he was actively involved in trying to go after, professors who had views that were different from him, trying to get them fired, things like that. And so to me, that's, it's extremely harmful to those people who experienced it. So I think as parents, as educators, we need to help people understand, that's crossing the line. It's okay to say I'm for free speech and open debate, but it's not a situation where it's just free speech from my side and not yours. And, I see a lot of this where it's like, yes, I want free speech. I want, conservatives to be able to speak up. But it's not just one-sided. We need to make sure that we keep open spaces and have, basically, we need to do more on the civic education side so that people understand what is civil discourse.
Civil discourse, that question of civil discourse, we are asking you for yourself, how are you talking to young people about this week's killing of right-wing activist Charlie Kirk? How do you discuss controversial views, toxic views, free debate? Give us a call, 604-669-3733, or you can just hit pound 690. You can also dial 1-800-825-5950. Our email address is bctoday@cbc.ca, and our TikTok live is up right now as well. Jason is calling us from Shuswap Lake. Hi, Jason, welcome.
Hey, thank you. So I did agree with a couple of things, points that your caller or your speaker there was just talking about, but I think a lot of the things to consider with what's going on with Charlie's message here, or the view of Charlie, is that most people know him through social media, and your social media is going to be quite skewed in the sense that if you are a liberal, you're going to see, liberal-based things, and the conservative-based things that you're going to see are going to be in opposition to your views. That's just the algorithm that we all deal with. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be the same thing for conservatives, where they're going to see it in a light and vice versa. But I really think that some of the stuff that I've seen over the last few days, as someone who's sort of followed this guy over the years, I don't agree with everything he says, but I do agree with quite a bit of it. And I think that the media, or the source of information in which you get your information about Charlie from, is quite skewed. So there's a lot of people talk about that clip of him with the we need a few gun deaths a year to equate to a Second Amendment rules and stuff like that. And if you actually watch the video, he's talking about how there's 50,000 deaths a year from car accidents. And, if we take, we agree that, mobility, transport, and the ability to get from point A to point B has outweighed those 50,000 deaths, because we want cars on the road. We need to be able to move. Those discussion about the Second Amendment and those deaths was in direct comment right after that. So, and that comment has been portrayed in the media quite a bit over the last few days as him being, a big firearms supporter or certain things. And I really...
As a critic of gun control.
It doesn't make sense. I think it doesn't make sense a lot of the time that the way that we are given the information is so filtered that the source of the information, that their message is portrayed more than the message of the individual that we're talking about. And he was, for me, I'm a young father. He was a young father. I'm in small business, and I just look at the direction of the world where I go, I think his biggest message was, be a good husband, be a good father, be a good individual. And he tried to debate these things. But like I've said, I really, one of the biggest things that I've looked at through it is that when you do watch his stuff and you really pay attention to it, the one thing that it looks like to me is that the liberals are really, really good at reading the headline of the article, and the conservatives are really, really good at reading the article.
Jason, thank you very much. It is a whole, is looking at a person as a whole. And yes, he was a 31-year-old father and left behind a family. He was someone who did also, promote conspiracy theories as well. And I take your point about the algorithm and how social media kind of feeds into where you fall and what your views are, and you kind of fall into that echo chamber. But I guess what he's sort of saying is what we're seeing is a small part of who Charlie Kirk was.
Yeah. Well, part of the problem is that obviously the most inflammatory stuff is what gets into the media. And so, for me, I'm a researcher, I'm a political scientist. I read all kinds of media.
You read the articles?
Yes, I read the articles. And the reality is that, yes, I completely understand that, we have to mention Fox News here because that's where a lot of people are getting their information, and it tends to veer towards the conservative side, and as well as social media. So, what we have is an information landscape that has been divided, and that's creating more divisiveness in the country. And so, yes, I don't disagree with what the caller said, that yes, people aren't necessarily getting the full spectrum of the person, but we have to also make sure that we are not, ignoring, some of the key factors that lead people to have the positions they do.
That point about the social media echo chamber, how do you get past that?
Oh, goodness.
How do you broaden out?
That's the $1 million question. Yeah. I wish we could, really figure this out. But the problem is, I see it in my own social media. We tend to protect our spaces by only having people whose views we appreciate. And so it's a really tough question, but I think that if you are willing to be open and, talk to people, who are maybe, not as far to one direction or the other as you, and that helps. But it's really a conundrum right now because it seems to be getting worse, not better.
Jason, thank you so much for the call from Shoe Swap. And we are taking your calls. How are you approaching this discussion? Perhaps you have a young person in your life. Jason was a young father. And how are you talking about political violence? Young people have seen this on their social media, perhaps even inadvertently. And how do you discuss political division? How do you discuss controversial views, toxic views, and have that conversation, whether you are a young person or have a young person in your life? I'd like to put out the numbers right now: 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can also just hit pound 690 on your cell phone. You can also send us an email, bctoday@cbc.ca, and our TikTok live is up too. You can leave a comment there. I have another guest right now joining us. Now, Charlie Kirk has been credited by U.S. President Donald Trump specifically for building support for the MAGA movement among young people. And for a bit more on that aspect, I'm joined now by Craig A. Johnson. He's a lecturer at UC Berkeley, and he's the author of the book, How to Talk to Your Son About Fascism. He also hosts the podcast 15 Minutes of Fascism, and he joins us now today from Berkeley, California. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you so much for joining us. Given the title of your book, how are you thinking about the events this week, the conversations around them, particularly among young people?
Yeah, I mean, like your previous guest was talking about, it's a really tough time to talk to young people about violence and extremism, especially for a lot of people in older generations who didn't live through periods of extreme partisan violence like lots of people in the United States are going through. So in that way, they're sort of unprepared. They can't warn their kids about it in the same way that they can about the risks of sexually transmitted diseases or drugs or, all the other sort of uncomfortable conversations that you need to have with a child. So a lot of parents are floundering.
And what do you see as a kind of opening, a way forward in that conversation?
Well, the real thing to do is to know that young people are going to be encountering right-wing messaging. They're going to be encountering extremist views. They're going to be encountering disturbing content online. That's just part of the nature of online culture. Some of the things that we're learning about the supposed shooter of Charlie Kirk, the person who is in custody right now, is that it seems like he was very steeped in sort of extremist and fringe online culture in a way that might seem like it's something that wouldn't really happen to anybody, but in fact, in reality, for lots of young people, that's just very normal. The kinds of memes that he was sharing, the kinds of things that he thought was funny, those are very normal. So the thing to know is you're not going to be the first person to introduce these concepts to young people just by talking to them about them and warning them about them. You can't shelter them from it. You have to really get out ahead of it. And so unfortunately, a time like this is maybe a time to have that conversation with a young person and to say, like, is any of this content stuff that you've ever seen? Have friends shared these memes with you?
I'll just also note for our TV audience that we may be pausing for, we'll be pausing for a TV ad break in about a minute from now. So there may be a pause in what you're viewing. You can also watch us on YouTube and listen to us on CBC Radio. I want to talk to you about the differing views, right? And how people view these controversies. President Donald Trump on social media on Wednesday in a video, he said, for years, those on the radical left have compared wonderful Americans like Charlie to Nazis and the world's worst mass murderers and criminals. And he said this kind of rhetoric is directly responsible for the terrorism that we're seeing right now in this country. As well, Florida Republican Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna wrote, this is her quote, "Damn one of you who called us fascists did this. You are the hate you claim to fight. Your words caused this." So what do you make of that argument that it is using that word and that framing that inflames emotions and can lead to violence?
Well, as a scholar of the right wing, fascism is a very specific thing, and it gets thrown around a lot as an insult, not just by people on the left, but also by people on the right. One of the things that we seem to be learning again about this person who's in custody on suspicion of killing Charlie Kirk is that he was probably an adherent of an even further right-wing perspective than Charlie Kirk was, one that's associated with a person named Nick Fuentes. This is an online subculture called Groypers, who accused Kirk of being a fascist. And Nick Fuentes is an extremely right-wing individual who would say racist slurs, he was very openly anti-Semitic, et cetera, et cetera. And so the fact is that, yeah, fascism is a word that's often just used as an insult without much content.
And what is the context you want to leave people with?
I mean, the real context here, unfortunately, is that this isn't going away. This is probably the beginning of a wave of partisan violence that will sweep over the United States possibly for quite a long time. And so keep your loved ones safe and prepare your children to grow up in a situation that's very different from the one you did.
Craig A. Johnson, I appreciate talking to you and hearing from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
The author of the book, How to Talk to Your Son About Fascism, and the host of the podcast, 15 Minutes of Fascism, Craig A. Johnson, joined us from Berkeley, California. Very dire words there, Terri Givens.
Indeed.
How do you respond? How do you process that?
Well, I'm in the same boat. I have two sons. They're 21 and 25. And my older son at one point told me that he had, almost gotten dragged down into one of these far-right, discussions. And he kind of pulled himself out of it. And that's when I realized, we as parents don't even necessarily know what our kids are getting pulled into. And COVID didn't help with that, right? We were all kind of caught up in COVID while our kids were online. And so what I've learned from that is I need to be talking to my sons on a regular basis.
I know you're at this conference of political scientists right now. I can't imagine that there's anything else you're talking about.
Yes, it's definitely high on the agenda. And it goes beyond Charlie Kirk, right? We're talking about the divisions in society. Our APSA president, Tae-Koo Lee, last night gave a really great speech about the issue of divisions and how we as political scientists can try to step up and be conscious about how we can influence the public discourse.
Well, I really appreciate your joining us for this discourse today. Terri, thank you for stepping away from the conference for a moment, and have a good day. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
That's Terri Givens, UBC political scientist. It is 12:30 now, and you're with BC Today here on CBC. We are live on CBC Radio, CBC Television, live streaming as well on YouTube at CBC British Columbia and on TikTok. I'm Michelle Elliott. Thanks so much for being with us. And coming up in our next half hour, we are going to get our biweekly visit from Master Gardener Brian Minter. So get your gardening questions ready. Right now, it is time for a CBC News Update.
Good afternoon. BC's public service workers are expanding job action to overtime bans at several liquor distribution warehouses. The ban is also in effect at the LDB's head office in Burnaby. Pickets at other BC government offices have been up for close to 2 weeks in some locations. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency says the latest effort by a BC farm to stave off a cull of its ostrich flock is improper. The CFIA says the Universal Ostrich Farm's appeal in federal court to seek retroactive permission for a late submission of documents is improperly asking the court to decide on a matter of science. The farm says it has formally petitioned the federal agriculture minister to rescind the cull, and the new material is to support another stay of that cull. And the BC Wildfire Service says there is again the risk of lightning in the southeastern part of the province that may trigger new blazes as the fire season pushes into mid-September. The service says while it may seem close to the end of the wildfire season, burning bans are still active in parts of the province. And now the forecast on the north coast, mainly cloudy this afternoon with a high of 12, highs around 25 and cloudy with local smoke in the Peace. In the central interior, including Prince George, mainly cloudy with local smoke and a high of 21. Highs getting up to 30 with some sunshine and smoke in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, including Kelowna, sunny with a high of 30 as well. And mainly cloudy in Metro Vancouver and the Fraser Valley this afternoon, a mix of sun and cloud in Greater Victoria with highs around 21. That's your CBC News update from Vancouver.
Thanks so much, Rob.
Welcome.
Rob Zimmerman in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. It's just about 12:33 now, and John Candy's life and art is the subject of a new documentary, John Candy, I Like Me. It was recently screened at the Toronto Film Festival, and it's slated to run during Vancouver's Film Festival next month. Curtis Woloshuk is the director of programming for VIF. Now, he spoke yesterday to Dan Burritt on the CBC News at 6.
The documentary almost opens with Dan Aykroyd's eulogy from John's funeral, and it might be Dan Aykroyd's finest moment. It just speaks so beautifully to think what John Candy represented as a cultural figure, but also as a human being. And throughout the documentary, I think you see this the care he gave to younger stars like Macaulay Culkin, and how he also just knew how to share the screen with others as well. And then even in these clips that we see here that you shared at the beginning, how he can engage with anyone and kind of just bring anyone else into this realm of entertainment as well.
Where does this film, the documentary, succeed, and are there places where you think it perhaps falls short?
I think I don't think it's a failing of the film, but I think it's certainly reverential, and I think that is what it sets out to do, and it succeeds greatly. It's directed by Colin Hanks, Tom Hanks' son, and his father was a co-star with John Candy in Splash, of course, and I think you can see the affection that it's made for, probably from someone who heard many stories of his father sharing the screen with John Candy. And I think what the film does really beautifully is honor a time where Canadian comedy was really at the cutting edge.
That is Curtis Woloshuk, who is director of programming at the Vancouver International Film Festival. "12:34 now. You're with BC Today. Well, Brian Minter is here with his gardening advice and, of course, to take your questions. He's joining us from Country Garden Limited in Chilliwack. So you can call us now, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, or just hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Our email is bctoday@cbc.ca. And Brian is with us from Chilliwack now. Hi, Brian.
Hey, Michelle, wonderful to be here. And, it's all about bulbs right now. If you want to have a spectacular display in the spring, or even the promise of things coming up here and there in your garden or even in your lawn, now's the time to be able to put things together. And it is really important. And don't leave things to the very last minute, because some of your favorites may be sold out. And, we're looking forward to that. And I just wanted to say a few things about bulbs. First of all, I got the surprise in my life a couple of days ago. I was out in our back fields, and there was this incredible 3-foot display absolutely solid of the vibrant pink or lavender blooms of the autumn crocus. Now, these are bulbs that are sitting out in the field, just ignored year round, and but they've been multiplying year after year from a single bulb. There's this 3-foot display that is absolutely striking and spectacular. So they're still available now in garden stores. Normally they become available late August, but they're available. And people who really love to have the saffron crocus, your own saffron, you can still plant the sativa crocus right now, available, and they will bloom this fall, which is really interesting. You plant now, they bloom now. But the traditional bulbs, not that far away, in January and February beginning. And just think, cold winter, damp winter, all kinds of crazy stuff going in the world, but to have in your own private space some bulbs coming up in a container or in the ground, or more importantly, Michelle, more and more people, they don't have a big garden anymore, especially in smaller living spaces, but they do have a bit of a lawn area. And planting bulbs in the lawn is really neat. Snowdrops, for example, are wonderful to put in the lawn. Crocus come up beautifully and make a magnificent show. The contrasting green with the color of the bulbs is just absolutely fabulous. It really is. And the one that everybody forgets about, but probably the longest lasting bulb you can plant, are the beautiful grape hyacinths or muscari. Now, the blue is just so intense that it comes up, but they also come in white and pink. But they are nice to plant as an accompaniment for virtually everything. Kuchenhof Gardens in Holland, everything has muscari around it, and it makes a difference as well. And for a little bit later, not to spoil it from the beautiful scillas, the English bluebells are part of that scilla family as well, which are amazing. And so those are all pretty good in terms of pests in the garden. We have to worry about squirrels here. But the narcissus, we want to take a look at those. They're really, essentially the leaves are poisonous, so we don't have to worry about deer and squirrels and everybody else. But they're early blooming narcissus, particularly the little bulbocodiums. Again, you can plant that in your lawn if it's wonderful. But tete-a-tete happens to be one of the best narcissus. From a tiny bulb, so many beautiful blooms, and they last for a long period of time. And don't forget, we have early, mid-season, and late. You can extend that blooming period over a longer period of time, which is really, really wonderful to be able to have. And don't forget the fragrance too. There's a variety called Bridal Crown that is the most perfumed bulb I think you can possibly find. So remember that one. And lastly, the tulips, they're the showpieces, but squirrels love them. So you have to do a little protection from the squirrels. Let me tell you, they are becoming really nasty about this. But don't forget, early, mid-season, and late. The beautiful Kaufmannianas are the first ones to bloom. Then you get your mid-season, your early Triumph tulips and early doubles and singles, which are great. Then the late tulips, the Darwins, that make that big, beautiful display. And of course, the festivals and the tulip festivals, they rely on the Darwins, which are really late. I will say, have some screening or netting. So put it down first. Plant your bulbs in the soil around it, and then put the netting back over top and soil over top of that. You really have to do that to save your tulips right now. Narcissus aren't too bad. And Michelle, don't forget, the little heroes of right now are alliums. Alliums are spectacular. Pollinators go crazy over them. But at the end of season, when everything's done, June going into July, the alliums come up. The big globe ones, all different sizes and shapes. Schuberti is like a shooting star. It's incredible. They're absolutely amazing. And if you want something really different, it looks like an octopus bulb. But the Irameris, which grow 7 to 8 feet high as they mature and get bigger,
Oh my God.
you set them in the ground, but they have a long, long, striking flower. So there's some real novelty things out there which are great. So from the crocus sativus, the saffron crocus that will be blooming very shortly if you plant them, till next July, when you'd enjoy an Irameris or some of the fabulous, alliums that are out of this world. Those are the things I'd like to mention about. And this well-drained soil, that's the most important thing. But be a little creative. And don't forget, the most important thing is try and choose bulbs that perennialize or naturalize and come back year after year. So you do this once, and the show gets even better every year, which is so very important. So I just wanted to put a plug in because now's the time to do it.
Yes, absolutely. Brian Minter with me, our gardening columnist here on the show. And of course, Master Gardener. He's been with the program for many, many years and taking your gardening questions today. Again, our numbers are 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, or just hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Our email is bctoday@cbc.ca. And your questions, you can put them on the TikTok live as well. Maggie is calling us from Nelson up first. Hi, Maggie. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, guys. How are you?
Just
Great.
fine.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
Thank
Nice
you.
to talk
I
to
have
you.
a question for you, Brian. It's an ongoing problem. I have a burning bush that I probably planted about 5-6 years ago. It actually looks like it's burning. It looks like it's been burnt. It looks like it's died several times. It looked terrible this spring. For some reason, it survived, but it still looks pretty bad, about as bad as it did this spring. I don't know if it's going to make it over the fall. Two things: should I prune it now because it's a lot of just dead stems, or do you have a replacement that gives me a nice pop of color for the fall that I don't really have in any of my other plantings?
Two things, and I think they are zone 5. By the way, yes, go ahead and prune right now. Prune it back hard. And I'm not sure why it's going this way. They'll take -40. They're incredibly hardy and tough plants. I would probably put some sea soil around, improve the soil, and even at this late date, I would probably give them some feed, some slow release feed to try and get that plant to come back to life. But yes, absolutely prune it, but improve the soil. That's very, very important. Two things I would look at. They're not household words, but Itea. There's one called Little Tent Henry, by the way, which is absolutely beautiful for fall color. It flowers late in the summer when nothing else is flowering. And Clethra are the other ones. So Clethra and Itea, plants that would be hardy in Nelson, but beautiful to have flowers late summer. Very tough, both of them, but they would give you a nice show when the fall color starts to come in. They're magnificent, Maggie.
Thank you, Maggie. Sounds like a great option for you. Nice alternative there. You got that color coming in then. Maggie, thank you for the call. Janice is next at Port Alberni now. Hi, Janice.
Hello.
What's your question for Brian? Yeah.
It's about a persimmon, and it was in a pot for about 3 years. It's been in the ground for about 5, never produces any flowers. I gave it a cut back this spring, and it's looking incredibly healthy and growing back, but what can I do to get it to flower?
Janice, is it the Asian persimmon?
The Fayushu, I think. Yeah.
Fuyu, yeah, probably. Okay. Nice.
Okay.
Yeah. Patience is, I had one, it took me 7 years to get blooms on it. They need to be well established and so on, but it took me 7 years before they started to bloom. And then within a few years, I had 500 Asian fruits on it. I was so thrilled. I love persimmons, but the Asian ones are the ones that are non-astringent, which is such an important thing. Means you can pick them a little bit greener and still get the flavor, but they ripen quickly and they never ripen until November. So at this point here, look after it. Keep it going. Now you've pruned it back. You've probably added another year, Janice. I'm sorry by doing that, but just leave it as it is. And the feed, the nutrient around the drip line of the tree, please put something like 10, 15, 19 with the micronutrients in it. I would do it when they first show, they're late to come out in the spring, first show green, and then midsummer again, 10, 15, 19. You want that high phosphorus and potash to encourage new blooms to come. But no more pruning after this point, please, Janice. Just a little bit of patience in the feeding, but high phosphorus and potash, that's important. You do not want any growth anymore. You just want the branches to get strong so those blossoms will come. So 2 more years.
A lot of patience, Janice. Thank you for the call, but it sounds like it's worth it, right? Worth the wait.
And they are self-fertile. Yeah, they're self-fertile because some folks worry about that too.
Janice, thank you. Good luck. Russ is in Nanaimo now. Hi, Russ. Thanks for calling in. What's your question for Brian?
Yeah, good afternoon. Happy Friday. Brian, I have a question about my tomatoes. I grow them in the greenhouse, and I do okay. But I find that early season or the first batch of tomatoes are always much better than the subsequent sets. They get smaller and less flavorful. Is it fertilizing? Is it water? Is it too hot in my greenhouse? How can I keep those big tomatoes going through the whole season?
Yeah, and you know, we have an industry in Canada on greenhouse tomatoes. First of all, they have different varieties specifically bred to be able to produce in greenhouses. So that's one. I'm going to throw an old, now it's a heritage variety at you called Moneymaker. It's still around, but we used to grow them when I was a little kid. I have to go and pick them and shake the branches early in the morning. But getting the right variety is the most important. And Moneymaker would be one I would try because it's just so reliable and so productive. And yes, earlier on, they're great, but how do you keep the heat, which is if you got them in a greenhouse, the intensity of the heat is really tough on them, the thorough deep watering. And I'm not sure what you're feeding them, Russ, but again, a fertilizer that has lots of calcium in it, which is very, very important, like a really good tomato food. But basically, and I would even give them time release. I don't know how you ameliorate the heat in the summertime. That's playing a role in this. It's just so hot that everything is not working inside. And that way I would put it to that. But try Moneymaker. It's less susceptible to that type of damage and will take the heat a lot better. But Russ, I think that's all you need to do.
And so would I be better off planting them outside of the greenhouse?
Honestly, I would do outside and inside, depending on the summer we have. But yes, absolutely. And it's hardly anybody grows it. You can get the seed easily. We still grow Moneymaker because they just have a wonderful relationship with that variety. But medium size, so productive, and it really has pretty darn good flavor as well.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Russ.
Have a great weekend, Russ, in Nanaimo. We have a question on TikTok for you, Brian. And Gilly writes, I have peonies in pots and my cat peed in the soil, so they didn't bloom this year. How can I fix it?
Well, there's nothing, I don't think, to do with the cat pee.
No.
But remember, one of my favorite sayings is solution to pollution is dilution. So you really have to make sure you get that urine diluted. That's very, very important. I would say because once the peony leaves start to go brown, Michelle, they basically are finished because a lot of them will be dug now already at this time and ready to go. So I would take them out of that soil. I would repot them in a very well-drained soil. Try and use a tree soil if you can. It's more open and porous, what peonies really love. But I'd repot the peony right now. And when you take it out, you'll see the roots. You've got a really good thick root. That's a good sign for next year. But anytime that happens in the meantime, just soak it really, really well. And, if you know that the cat is actually doing it, that's the way to be able to prevent this. But let's transplant them right now into a good soil.
Okay, Gilly, thank you very much. And maybe the cat isn't to blame. So there you go. Thank you very much. Vindicated. Let's go to our callers again. Our numbers once again, 1-800-825-5950. 604-669-3733, or you can just hit pound 690 on your phone. Our email is bctoday@cbc.ca. And just like Gilly, you can leave a question on our TikTok. It's at CBC British Columbia. Let's head to Revelstoke now. Nancy is calling in with a question for Brian. Hi, Nancy. Welcome to the show.
Hello. I would like to plant a pink dogwood tree in my yard, and I'm wondering if fall is a good time to do that.
It is, and Revelstoke, you're fortunate you get so much snow in winter, so you don't get the severe cold. I've seen dogwoods doing well in Revelstoke, so that's great. Remember, you have two choices: the early one, which will flower. It's the Cornish Florida rubra is what you want to get. I think that's the best early one. And then a month later in June, you'll get the Kuza dogwoods. Pink Kuza, Satomi is one of the most well-known. So you've got two choices. But yes, plant them now. It'll allow the roots to start becoming established, and it'll make all the difference in the world. Because sometimes you put them in spring, they're trying to make leaves and grow and get established. It's a little harder. But any time now would be a great time, Nancy.
Also, I got one more question, if that's okay. If I plant hollyhocks now, will next summer be their second year, so they'll bloom?
We're actually there's many varieties now. You're talking about vernalization and so on, but if you put the seed in right now, I think you'll get blooms next year. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, that's good. Thank you for the advice.
Thank you
Thanks,
very
Nancy.
much for the call, Nancy. Good to hear from you in Revelstoke. We actually have an email as well. I want to get to some of the email questions here. Darlene writes, I planted 10 lavender plants in planters this spring. None have bloomed. That's
In
that's the email.
planters, okay. In planters, lavenders are tough. The soil holds too much moisture for one thing, so you need to use, like we're talking, a perennial soil or tree soil where it's more open and porous. The fact that they're live and still looking good is a huge bonus. We're finding that many of the lavenders still have buds on them right now, so you might get a late bloom. It depends when you planted them in. And always make sure you use your English lavenders. Those are the ones that will actually be hardy for winter, because that's our next concern right now. Not the Spanish lavenders. You want to use the Hidcote, the Munstead, all those wonderful varieties. But not to worry. If they're doing well and survive over winter, they will bloom next year. But I have a suspicion you may get some blooms late in the fall.
Okay, still hope yet. Thank you for the email, Darlene. Again, it's bctoday@cbc.ca if you want to send us your quick question there for Brian. Right now, let's go back to our callers. And Jean-Bernard is joining us from Winlaw. Hi, Jean-Bernard.
Hi, Brian. Hi, Michelle.
Hello.
Hi.
First of all, Brian, just quickly, I have to say the missus and I are huge fans, and so
thank you.
Next time we're driving through the Fraser Valley, we want to come see the nursery and all
Absolutely,
that.
yes.
That.
Come and say hi. I'd love to meet you.
Yeah.
I really would.
Yeah, great. My question's about a Pinot Noir grape plant I have. It's probably about 4 or 5 years old now, so it's survived the winters here. I'm usually mulching it and protecting it for the winter. This is the first year of actually getting some fruiting, some actual grapes. Yep. My question is pruning. When and how? Because it seems, I think the lack of fruit is because it's just been sending off all these little shoots for the last few years, and I have never pruned.
That's such a good question, because many other folks are interested, John Bernard. That's great. What you want to do is remember, you can European prune or American prune. You want to have one stem coming straight up, and then off that main stem, about knee height and about chest height, you can have 2 sets of branches radiating out like an espaliered plant. And that's really the best form. I really love going by wineries. Certainly we have a lot in the Fraser Valley right now. And I kind of watch when they prune. And the time to prune is generally when the leaves are off, when they're dormant. Between the latter part of November and the end of February is sort of the window to prune. You don't want to leave it too late because they bleed quite badly at that time. But no, that's a pruning time. So the letter T or a double T with one stem in the center and radiating those branches out to the side. That's the best way to prune. But copy the vineyards around, because they really know what they're doing.
And just a quick follow-up with us here, we do have a bit of a harsher winter, relative to southern BC. So is that going to affect the timing? Like if it were October, November is best then?
Yeah, no, you should be fine. Great. I mean, look at we've had this severe winter a few years ago. It did so much damage. Pinot Noir is reasonably a hardy grape. You're looking at zone 5 in terms of the hardiness of most of the grapes here right now. And I think you should be fine. Remember, 2 things. Always put mulch around the base of the grape if you possibly can, a bark or sawdust or whatever you have. And don't forget, if you're really worried about it, all you have to do is take some insulate, that material that looks like remade cloth, just do a wraparound. It makes a 10 degrees Celsius, difference in terms of making sure that plant's okay. So just a quick wraparound would always make a difference, and make sure you never lose those grapes.
Right. Okay. Well, thanks both of you.
Yeah, thank you
nice
so
to
much.
Talk to you.
Yeah, have a great day, Jean-Bernard in Winlaw. Thanks for the call. Let's go to Castlegar, and Brian is calling us now. Hello, Brian.
Hello, Brian Minter. This is Brian Pinter from Castlegar.
Okay. Almost
I
related.
sense a show coming on. Yeah.
Exactly. We must be distant cousins of some sort.
We are, I'm
my
sure.
call is about potential cutworms in my cucumber patch. In that I've got a designated cucumber patch that I planted cucumbers for a good 10 years or so. And as of 2-3 years ago, I had cucumbers starting to die. And when I pulled them out, and they would grow and they're looking great and they're flowering, and all of a sudden, just within a couple of days, they would die.
Wilt.
And when I pulled them out right at the surface, the stem was all mush and rotted. You could see as if something had cut through or ate its way through. And now I've gone to an even more process. I pulled all the dirt out, and when I carefully opened it up, there were hundreds of minute little white insects scurrying all over the place, and I mean like about a millimeter in length.
Were they worms or what?
Well,
I don't know
those
what they
sound
are.
like
Some kind of
centipedes or
insect.
millipedes. But if they scramble, it's a centipede or a millipede. I'm quite sure, Brian. But
So do I need
in
to
terms of
replace the soil, or
no, I think you're okay there, but we need to have a control. We used to, in British Columbia, have Sevin, S-E-V-I-N, as a control, and it worked very, very well. It was taken off the market, and we really haven't got a substitute, but we are finding very, very good success with BTK. BTK is a bacterial spray. It's organic, and in our lawn areas, there's a different type of bacteria right now killing all the grubs and taking care of the grubs that the predators just dig up our lawns for. We're having good success with that, and I'm really trying and experimenting with putting BTK, which is meant to go on our vegetables, that will control all the larvae, the caterpillars that come up and start chewing everything, and it's safe for the natural predators and so on. But BTK as a drench in your soil when you first plant them in the spring, and maybe a couple of times later, I think you'll find that will get you through without any problem, Brian.
okay, so it's like a chemical that I would put into a water can and put it on that way?
Yeah. Not a chemical, it's a bacteria, but yes, you're absolutely right. Instead of spraying it on,
follow the directions in a water base.
That's right, absolutely. Well done.
Well done, Brian Pinter. You've got it down. Thank you very much. Thank you for the call. We have an email about sawfly caterpillars on trees. Would that be kind of similar then, Brian?
Yeah, that very much so. It's effective, and what it does in most cases, they stop feeding right away. It puts a bit of a flavoring we see this feeding where they're out there already, but we don't have many things to control. But I'm very fond of this particular product because it does work, and we're getting really good success, and it's organic and very important.
Brian, we had a lot of emails about similar things too. Thank you so much. You have a great weekend.
Michelle, and don't forget, everybody, bulbs, time to go.
That's right. Bulbs, time to go, Brian.